Hello and welcome. We're glad you're viewing our gardening video today. It was created by the Walton County Master Gardener Extension volunteers to serve as a companion resource for our Gardening with the MG's series of presentations presented at local libraries. Today, our video in our edible gardening series will be Culinary Herbs. First things first. Before we get started, we might address a pressing question. How do you pronounce the word? Do you say herbs or herbs? There are many different reasons for the various pronunciations of the word H-E-R-B. The oldest form of the word was actually spelled E-R-B. That spelling was altered to H-E-R-B in the late 15th century. Today, Britain and several Commonwealth nations pronounce the H, while in the United States, except in New England, the word is pronounced ERB or herb. I guess it all depends on which English you speak. Actually, either pronunciation is correct. For this presentation, though, this Southern speaker will drop the H and say herb. Now, let's define our term. What is an herb? In the broadest sense, soft-stem green plants are termed herbs, probably because the word herb comes from the Latin word herba, meaning grass. In general, an herb is a plant or plant part valued for its culinary, cosmetic, medicinal, or aromatic qualities. According to the dictionary, the botanical definition of an herb is a seed-producing annual, biennial, or perennial that does not develop persistent woody tissue but dies down at the end of the growing season. However, we recognize that not all herbs die down at a season's end. Examples of these include rosemary and sage. The use of plants as herbs has been important to all cultures since before history was recorded. For thousands of years, hundreds of tribal cultures used wild and cultivated herbs for medicinal and food purposes. Historically, culinary herbs and spices were used as food preservatives as well as for their health-enhancing properties. For centuries, herbs have been important to the cultures in Egypt and China. We know that Egyptian schools of herbalists have existed since 3000 BC, and the importance of herbs to Chinese culture is extremely well documented. For instance, during the 5th century, we know that ginger plants were grown in pots and carried on long sea voyages between China and Southeast Asia to provide both fresh food and to prevent scurvy. In the Middle Ages, where there is evidence of early herb gardens, monks became the custodians of herbal knowledge. Then, in the late 16th century, an encyclopedia of herbs that grouped plants according to their use was written by John Gerard. This book's name was Herbal. Fast forward to today, where the business of producing fresh herbs for consumption has become one of the fastest growing industries in U.S. agriculture. In fact, in the United States, about 200 billion pounds of herbs and spices are produced each year. Since I mentioned both herbs and spices, you might be wondering how those two differ. Herbs are the leaves, both fresh and dried, and they're more frequently grown in temperate regions where they tend to be green and often have subtle flavors. An exception to this rule is the rose, which is considered an herb. Rose hips are used to make delicate teas and also for jams, jellies, and soups. They are high in vitamin C. Nasturtium is also an herb, and we use not the leaves necessarily, but the flowers in salads and as a garnish. Spices, on the other hand, are the seeds, roots, fruits, flowers, or barks and minerals of plants, and they usually grow in the tropics. Spices produce a dramatic, pungent flavor, and they are found in the shades of brown, black, or red. Herbs are often the first introduction when people are making a transition from being indoor gardeners to outdoor gardening. Herbs can be used alone or in combination to add distinctive tastes and flavors to the simplest and the most complex recipes. In general, we think of fresh herbs as being more flavorful than dried herbs. But herbs that you dry or freeze yourself can add pizzazz to homemade meals throughout the year. And herbs are also useful in landscaping and adding texture and color to plantings. You have to admit they do smell delightful when you run your hand across a plant, even before you snip them to use in cooking. An example of that is the Salem rosemary, the dark opal basil, and the lemon verbena you see on your screen. When planting your own herb garden, begin with the herbs that you enjoy using the most. For instance, do you enjoy Italian cooking? Then you might want to choose basil or oregano to start. Or are you one who likes to drink tasty teas? Think in terms of chamomile or peppermint. When planting your garden, group your herbs according to light, irrigation, and soil requirements, which makes them easier to tend and to harvest. Most herbs enjoy full sun, but there are a few that tolerate shade, including many in the mint family, such as peppermint and spearmint. And herbs can be classified as either annual, biennial, or perennial. Let's talk about a few of the basics of herb gardening. As most master gardeners will say, start with a soil test. We want to know what the pH of the soil is, because for herbs, they prefer pH of in a range of 6 to 7.5. You want to choose a site that is very well drained and it gets at least 6 hours of sunlight a day. Too much water will drown your herbs. When thinking in terms of fertilizer, use a very light hand if you add any at all. And then add at least 1 to 2 inches of mulch to maintain moisture around your herbs. In the South, it's a good idea to consider growing your herbs in containers or in raised beds. 2 foot by 4 foot beds that are built 8 to 12 inches high work well for most gardeners. Pinch off the flower heads to promote strong leaf growth, unless, of course, you want to attract pollinators. At that time, you want to allow some of your herbs to go to flower. And speaking of pollinators, we ask that you use integrated pest management practices that rely on cultural, biological, and physical control techniques, as opposed to using pesticides. A fine spray underneath leaves will wash many bugs away. If absolutely necessary, use an insecticidal soap or horticultural oils against severe outbreaks of aphids, mites, or whiteflies. Remember, traditional synthetic pesticides are not labeled for use on culinary herbs. An important thing to consider when planting herbs is how you get your plants. Some herbs should be direct seeded because they don't transplant well. Examples of these are coriander, dill, parsley, and fennel. Some herbs, however, should be purchased as transplants or can be propagated by cuttings or division because they simply don't come true from seeds. Examples to consider are mints, oregano, rosemary, thyme, and tarragon, chives, lemon balm, and monarda. Because the herbs we're talking about today will be used in your kitchen, let's think about the categories of culinary herbs. First of all, there are robust herbs. These are the full-bodied, rich in flavor, and are often used alone, but sometimes mixed with a few other herbs. These will maintain their flavor when they're cooked, and they can be roasted, braised, or grilled. Herbs that are classified as robust include rosemary, thyme, sage, and garlic. Then there are fine herbs, which mix well with other herbs and are often added toward the end of the cooking process. You find them in salads, and they can be eaten raw. Some examples of fine herbs include dill, basil, and parsley. And now for our list of the top 10 easy-growing culinary herbs for you to consider. First, dill, chives, flatleaf parsley, rosemary, basil, oregano, common thyme, common sage, fennel, and all types of mint. Herbs in the mint family are known as aggressive spreaders, and you will be doing yourself a favor if you plant them in containers. So let's talk about those. When planting your herbs in containers, you'll want to group your containers to create a scented focal point in your garden. You can use half whiskey barrels and other large containers because they make such an impact in any garden. Be sure to snip your herbs frequently to encourage growth and promote healthier plants. And as always, water containers more frequently because they do dry out quickly. You'll want to make sure they have good drainage. And even though you don't want to let them dry out, don't overwater them either. My own herb garden utilizes containers. I make sure that the containers are large enough to accommodate a plant's root system and the herb's ultimate size, and I place those containers in full sun with easy access to my kitchen. The herbs that are in my garden include parsley, rosemary, sage, thyme, basil, chives, oregano, and the ever-popular mint. And I can't stress this enough. Mint is an aggressive spreader, so it's wise to grow them in containers rather than the ground. Herbs will be ready to harvest before most of your traditional edibles in your garden. You'll want to harvest herbs frequently after the plants have been established. Early morning is the best time to harvest your herbs before the temperature gets too hot. And you want to harvest herbs before they flower, since that means the plant can put its energies into making leaves. Pinch off all flower heads as they appear, unless, of course, you want to attract pollinators. You'll want to harvest annual herbs before frost, but refrain from harvesting perennials such as rosemary and sage about 1 month before the first frost to keep them vigorous. If you do harvest perennial herbs in the winter, you'll find that the taste is not quite as strong as it was in the summer. One of the wonderful things about herbs is you can enjoy them year-round. You can dry them, according to the information there that you see on your screen, by hanging the whole plant in a paper bag, as illustrated. You can also dry herbs in the microwave on the low setting. The time will vary, so read your own oven's instructions. You can freeze them. Be sure to rinse them in cold water and chop them finely. Then use ice cube trays as a handy tool for freezing herbs, or you can freeze them singly on a cookie sheet. Then, once they're frozen, transfer them to a plastic freezer bag. Remove all excess air and completely seal. Frozen herbs rarely work well in salads, but they do work well in soups. And of course, you can always contain them. Plant your herbs in containers using potting soil and bring them indoors. Some, like basil, start from seed. Others, you want to take cuttings to root more types of herbs. Be sure to place them in the sunniest spot in your house because they do like lots of light. If you'd like more detailed information on preserving herbs by drying or freezing, as well as making flavored vinegars, please check out this resource classic from the University of Georgia Cooperative Extension, now in its 6th edition, So Easy to Preserve. There's information on your screen on how to order your copy. Many herbs are used in a variety of cuisines, thanks to the centuries of herb and spice trading among countries. You'll find herbs in the Mediterranean cuisine, in the Latin American cuisine, and in the Asian cuisine. Now, let's talk some more about individual culinary herbs grouped by their cuisines. We'll start with the Mediterranean cuisine. Basil, which is also known as sweet basil, is an annual. It grows to a height of about 20 to 24 inches, and you need to space it about 6 to 12 inches apart. Basil loves sun, and it grows easily from seed. Remember, add basil at the very last moment of cooking, so it will not lose its flavor in the dish. Frozen basil does hold its flavor better than dried basil does. Our next herb in the Mediterranean cuisine is Greek oregano, which, unlike basil, is considered a perennial, as it is hardy to zone 5. Its height is 24 inches, and you need to space it 8 to 12 inches apart. Greek oregano likes a lot of sun, so grow it in full sun, and you can propagate it from seed, cuttings, or division. Greek oregano is the one that is favored by many chefs for its bold, spicy flavor, but please know there are over 44 species, 6 subspecies, 3 botanical varieties, and 18 naturally occurring hybrids of oregano. Italian oregano, for instance, is a cross between Greek oregano and the other herb marjoram. Common sage is one of about 800 species and is also part of the mint family. It is a perennial, as it is hardy to zone 4. The growth height is 18 inches. You need to space sage about a foot apart. It does like full sun, and while it grows very slowly from seed, you can take stem cuttings and propagate by division and layering. The best flavored sage is common sage. You can use it fresh for cooking. And remember, flowering sage attracts butterflies. Flat leaf or Italian parsley is a biennial. which grows 18 to 24 inches and needs to be spaced 12 to 15 inches apart. It does like sun, but parsley will grow in partial shade. It grows from seed, but please know it is slow to germinate. Don't give up. Although it's a biennial, grow parsley as an annual. And choose the flat leaf parsley for your cooking needs, while the curly parsley is primarily used as a garnish. Plant plenty of parsley as it attracts the caterpillars of the black swallowtail butterfly, along with dill and fennel. If you have plenty of parsley, you can share it with these beautiful creatures. Handpick them from the plants that you want to eat and move them to the plants you want the caterpillars to eat. Dill, while listed with the Mediterranean cuisine herbs, is often used in German cooking, as well as in spreads and relishes. Dill is an annual, and it grows to a height of 3 to 5 feet, and you'll want to space it 3 to 12 inches apart. Dill requires sun, but it will tolerate some partial shade, and it does tolerate drier soils. Dill grows from seed. It grows very well from seed. Can be sown early in the spring and throughout the summer. Both the leaves and the seeds are especially tasty, not only in pickles, but in other seasonings for breads and for fish. Remember, dill is a popular host plant for the black swallowtail butterfly, as you see there on the picture. Remember, plant plenty, some for you and some for the caterpillars. Fennel is an herb whose entire plant is edible. The seeds can be used in sausage and baked goods, and the leaves used with fish, vegetables, cheese spreads, and soups. And you'll find the green stalk bases used in salads or Italian dishes, prepared with mozzarella, olive oil, and tomato. Fennel is a biennial, and it will grow 4 to 5 feet in height. Space it 4 to 12 inches apart in full sun. Fennel grows very well from seed, but it is difficult to transplant. Fennel is another host plant for the black and anise swallowtail butterflies. You'll sometimes hear the caterpillars of these butterflies called parsley worms because they're found in the plants of the parsley or carrot family. And as we say, plant plenty of fennel, some for you and some for the caterpillars. The Latin name Rosmarinus, the name of rosemary, means dew of the sea, and it was so called because it grew around the Mediterranean, which is why we find it popular in Mediterranean cuisine. Rosemary is a perennial. It is hardy, zone 7 and above. It can reach 3 to 6 feet, so consider it a shrub. You do want to space it at least 12 inches apart if you prune it. Rosemary likes sun. And it's best to propagate rosemary by taking stem cuttings, as the seeds are very slow to germinate. Rosemary is a versatile plant, and you will find it in many international cuisines. Here is an herb that I have recently added to my own herb garden, winter savory. It's a low-growing bush that does well not only in herb gardens, but also in rock gardens. It is a perennial, as it is hardy to zone 6. It will reach a height of 24 inches and needs to be spaced 18 inches apart. Winter savory likes sun, and it grows best in light sandy soil. Propagate it by using cuttings. Prune it often for its best leaf flavor. Winter savory's flavor is more robust than the summer savory, which is actually an annual and that will die before the first freeze. Everyone should have a little thyme in their garden. Thyme is a perennial and that is hardy to zone 5. It can grow 4 to 8 inches depending on the variety. You want to space it 6 to 12 inches, again depending on its variety. Thyme likes a lot of sun, and you can propagate it by cuttings, seeds, or division. There are hundreds of varieties of thyme. I myself like the English thyme and the lemon thyme and grow both of those in my own garden. Here's an herb that's actually in the onion family, chives. It's a perennial and it's hardy in zones 3 through 9. The height can reach 6 to 12 inches depending on the soil and the spacing, which should be about a half an inch apart. You'll want to thin as you use it in order to make room for it. Chives requires full sun, and you can grow it from seeds, bulbs, or division. Since chives tend to clump, they should be separated every year or so. See those pretty flowers in that picture? Yes, the flowers of chives may be eaten in a salad, and they make a beautiful accent or garnish. Now let's take a look at some herbs used in Latin American cuisine. Probably the most notable is cilantro. It is an annual. It grows to the height of 24 inches and needs to be spaced 12 to 18 inches. Cilantro grows well in sun, but it will tolerate partial shade. Grow cilantro from seed. It does go to seed quickly, so you will want to plant in succession. Remember, the green parts of the plant, or the leaves, are what are commonly called cilantro, and the seeds are known as the spice coriander. An herb that is used in Latin American cuisine that you may not have considered is one called Nasturtium. It is an annual. It grows to a height of about 18 inches, although the climbing variety can reach 10 feet. You'll want to space them 6 inches apart in full sun, and you can grow them from seed. Give them plenty of room to grow. Note that the leaves, stems, and flowers have a peppery taste, and as you can see in that picture, the pretty flowers not only can be used as a garnish, they can also be used as an edible. Now let's talk about an interesting herb from the Latin American cuisine, Stevia. It is an annual, although in some parts it can be considered as a tender perennial. It grows to be about 12 to 24 inches in height and needs to be spaced 14 to 18 inches apart. It likes full sun, and since the seeds are difficult to germinate, it's more easily propagated by stem cuttings. A native to Paraguay and Brazil, this plant's fresh leaves taste like sugar. Now let's add a few herbs for the Asian cuisine, starting with bay laurel. Bay laurel is considered a perennial in this part of the South and can be grown in zone 7B and above. Still, many southern gardeners like to grow bay laurel in containers so the plant can be moved indoors at the approach of winter. Bay laurel grows in a container to a height of 6 feet, but in its native Mediterranean climate, it can grow to 50 feet. Since you're growing it in a container, you'll want to treat this as a small tree. Give bay laurel full sun to light shade. You can propagate bay laurel by seed, but it will grow very slowly for the first 2 years. Cuttings from snapping the tips off of branches may take 6 to 10 months to root. Bay laurel leaves are best harvested in the summer. They are very pungent, and you will use those in slow-cooked dishes, such as stews and gumbos and soups, usually adding just 1 leaf per pot. Do remember to remove the bay leaf before serving. Another classic herb in the Asian cuisine is ginger. Ginger is considered a tender perennial because it's not frost tolerant. When planting it, consider its height, which it will grow to 2 to 4 feet, and you'll want to space it about 12 inches apart. Ginger is an herb that will take partial shade. When propagating it, use the rhizomes. Cut each rhizome into pieces so that each piece has at least 2 growth nodes. Growth nodes are similar to the eyes of a potato. Then plant the cuttings about 1 inch deep. Interestingly, ginger is classified as both an herb and a spice, and it does have an intense, heat-filled flavor. Please note that the wild ginger that is native to the United States is not edible. This ginger is also called snake root, Canadian wild ginger, ginger root, Indian ginger, and false coltsfoot. Here's an herb in the Asian cuisine grouping you may not know that you can grow here. Lemongrass. In lower than zone 9, it is considered a tender perennial. Lemongrass grows to a height of 3 to 6 feet, and you'll want to space it about 3 feet apart. Lemongrass does take full sun, but it can take some light shade. You can propagate lemongrass from seed, but it's easier to propagate by division. This tall grass has its name because it has a citrus flavor, and it can be used in soups or salads. Again, if you want to keep lemongrass, dig it up and pot it to overwinter. Considered an essential herb in the Thai cuisine is Thai basil. In our location, it is an annual and is listed to grow 16 to 24 inches, although, depending on the variety, Thai basil can grow up to 2.5 feet tall. Space it 16 to 18 inches apart. And Thai basil can take some partial shade. Thai basil is an herb that can be grown from seed. I think that you'll agree that this is a striking plant in the garden with its purple stems, its green leaves, and its purple flowers. In the same family as chives, we find an herb that crosses over multiple cuisines, as it is found extensively worldwide. Garlic is a hardy perennial, especially in zones 7 through 10. It reaches a height of 24 inches, depending on the soil and how closely it is spaced. A good spacing is about 6 inches, so plant the cloves and the seeds about 2 inches deep, usually in the fall, and then as you use them, you can thin them. Garlic prefers full sun. You can propagate it by seeds, but division of cloves from the bulbs is probably the easiest way. Also remember, garlic cloves are usually planted in the fall for a late spring harvest when the stems fall back in the early summer. If you plant by seed, they will require an extra season to develop. It's time for a recap. Here's some information you might want to retain, all in a nutshell, from a detailed publication in the Home Garden series from the University of Georgia, Bulletin number 1170, Herbs in the Southern Garden. Today, on our video, we defined what an herb is, and we talked about how to pronounce it. We talked about the preferred methods and media for planting herbs. We learned that raised beds and containers allow herbs to flourish in the southern garden. We also discussed various methods of propagation for herbs, including by seed, by cuttings, and by division. We talked about how culinary herbs add zest to foods and beverages, and we mentioned some specific herbs such as basil and sweet bay. We talked about the various cuisines where you will use a variety of culinary herbs. And we mentioned several of those listed on your screen, such as parsley, bay, chives, rosemary, oregano, garlic, basil, cilantro, sage, and thyme. And we offered a list of 10 easy-to-grow herbs, including basil, the mints, oregano, sage, and chives. And if you have questions, please contact us at the information shared on your screen if you're local, or if you've joined us from another part of the country, please contact your local county extension office. Thank you for viewing our video today. We hope you've enjoyed the Gardening with the MG's video and that you now feel comfortable to go outside and enjoy your own garden. Goodbye.